All right, guys. Well, thank you for being here. I will say that I am very flattered seeing some of the faces in here. I know some of you guys are very successful syndicators and decided to skip the bus tour for this, so I'm very humbled by that. By a show of hands, is there anybody in the room that is an asset manager for your syndication? If you're a co-sponsor, any asset managers who do that? Okay, cool. Very cool. All right. How many people in this room are new students as of this year? Holy cow. All right. Well, for those new students, I definitely want to just encourage you to walk around, meet people, don't get tied down to a 5-hour-long conversation about someone's dog. Take advantage of this opportunity. I get, everybody gets tied down and you start to get in the minutiae in some of these conversations. I just want to encourage you to take this time and meet these people. If you see these red badges and you're a Foundations member, get in touch with these people, learn their names, get their business cards, right? What kind of deals are you doing? That's how this process works. So there's a lot of you guys I've spoke to who are kind of like, hey, I'm new in the Foundations. What do I do? Like, who do I talk to? Like, how does this work? And it's as simple as just going around and introducing yourself. Hey, what kind of deals you guys working on? How long you been in the program? What's been your, what's your story? Whatever the case may be. So I want to encourage that very, very much, very, very much. This is dangerous. And again, I'm humbled to be here. It's been a while since I've been on stage. I love being on stage. I'm a little nervous. I'll get this out of my system here in a second, though. So I got a laser pointer. She notified me. I'm going to need it. So I worked with Michael Becker. If you guys don't know who Michael Becker is, there's an Old Capital Radio podcast he does with Paul Peebles. Mike is a very, 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 very intelligent person. And I was fortunate enough when I was in single family. I used to do a lot of real estate guys bus tours in DFW. And it was basically me pitching single family and explaining it to people, and Mike pitching multifamily, explaining it to people. And at the end of the day, I said, I can't compete with this guy. He's just got a better investment, man. So, if you can't beat him, join him. And so I was fortunate enough, I knew enough about real estate and, whatever else for Mike to say, come on board. And so like a lot of you guys have invested a significant amount of money to be here. And in this program, I was fortunate enough to be young with no kids and have some freedom. And I took a job with Mike and made peanuts. It was not, great money. Nobody makes great money in asset management. That's not how you get rich. But it was an investment in myself. So I went from making really good money to making not really good money, but learning something that in the future is going to make me very, very rich. So, and I hope all of you get very, very rich from this, because if you do it like you're supposed to do it, then you will. All right. I got some stuff written down on this piece of paper here. That's water stain that Crystal Lee just gave me, because I don't do this speech as much as Brad has done his. This is my first time doing it. This is the first time we've done it. This is slides I created in the last couple of days. So bear with me here. But Mike's track record. So Michael Becker, obviously, again, owner of SPI. He's got about 5,000 doors here. There's several doors that we've syndicated and done with Brad's group. Just to give you some high-level bullet points, the last time I was there and looking at the numbers, SPI's equity multiple for their investors over the last 4 years, so they started the company in 2014, was about 267% on average. Mike will always tell you the wind's been in our sails. That's not common. Don't forecast that. Don't predict that. Don't act and assume that you're going to get to that number. But that's pretty substantial return, right? That's something that anybody here would be happy with. If you're not, then you're in the wrong room. But Mike has had a lot of success. He's done a lot of doors. He's had a lot of experience. His partners had a lot of experience. Obviously, the people that he surrounds himself with have had a lot of experience. And so it was really a good person to learn from. I also want to point out, Brad didn't mention this yesterday, but Brad's got a new YouTube. We're posting a lot of videos on there. There will be a promo for this video. That'll be on the new YouTube. He's got an Instagram now. I'm getting him around the hump there. So if you guys do have an Instagram, make sure you follow Brad, please. I kind of need these things to help us do better marketing in the future. Okay, so again, while I was at SPI, we did about 200 million in acquisitions, sold about 75 million in deals, managed 15 properties, about 4,500 doors, and 6 regionals. I also had some experience with HUD financing, and if any of you guys are in this deal here, West Point at Scenic Vista, there are some investors in the room, I think, that are in that deal. Show of hands, anybody in that deal? Okay, a few of you. So that's a HUD deal. That's an interesting thing to deal with. Anybody done a HUD deal, HUD financing? Other than this deal? No? Okay, well, talk to me before you pull the trigger, because it's fun dealing with HUD. You kind of got to jump through hoops. But here's some of the properties that I looked over, managed, whatever you want to call it. Skyview West in Fort Worth, Boulders. I think Boulders is a deal with Brad's students, some of Brad's students. Some of these deals are newer. This is a 08 vintage, 2004, 300 unit deal. This is a deal in Grapevine called Encore Mustang, 218 units, C-Class. We did the extended patios, some upgrades. Frankfurt Flats, which they're going to see on the bus tour today. I know a lot of students are in Frankfurt Flats. 334 units in North Dallas, 80s vintage. We've got a deal out here that I think it looks really old, but it's actually a 04 vintage, 128 units. Huntington Cove was a 100-unit townhome deal that we sold in North Dallas that I think got the highest ever recorded price per door for a B-class 80s vintage deal. I mean, we knocked that thing out of the park. Lakefront Villas, which they still own, probably my favorite deal. This is one of those deals where you can't see it on the front end, you can't forecast that kind of stuff, but it's a true C-class deal through and through. But it backs up to this nice little like pond. I wouldn't call it a lake. It's not like a small pond. It's decent size, but it's one of those things where like some of the balconies are overlooking the pond, and it's like, man, we raised the rents $100, $150. People just keep paying it, and the occupancy stays 95. It's one of those things where, again, you're never going to grab a deal and forecast it. But hey, you get into some of these deals and you're like, we're 2 years into this thing and we're like 25% or something over our year 3 performance number, and we're crushing it on this deal. So Mike won't sell it to me. I've been begging him for 6 months. But Mission Ranch is another deal that I know he's done with Brad's students. Overlook Ranch is 580 units in North Dallas. Slate Fort Worth is a deal that Brad's students were in. I know they crushed it on that deal. Yeah, that's sold. So they definitely crushed on that deal. I'm not going to tell the numbers, but a deal up in Denton, Woodhill, probably one of my favorite deals, just because of the atmosphere. A deal I would live in as a millennial. We had we knocked out the common areas. We had like a concrete ping pong table outside and the bag tot. I mean, it was a cool deal. So it's obviously you're tailoring a little bit more to students up there in Denton. And you got to do that. You got to kind of know the script of where you're at. And then West Point Scenic Vista, which is a HUD deal. Again, this is more of a B-class deal. Now, some of you guys are, well, I'd say most of you guys are probably investing in more C-class deals, smaller deals, 120 units, 200 units, things like that. Some of these deals are not going to really apply to you unless you're doing large syndications. But just to kind of show you, get an idea of the type of properties I've managed in the past. So ways to pay attention, or ways to pay for asset management. So show of hands, again, how many of you guys are paying with your time? How many guys are actually doing the asset management for your group? Is that a fun job? Yeah? I don't think anybody's ever said yeah to that. I'm surprised there's this many people in the room, because there's nothing fun about asset management. Unless you're a spreadsheet guy, that's how you get your rocks off. It's not me, but you got to learn it, right? You got to know what you're talking about. You got to know what you're looking at. If you want to succeed in this business, you got to understand the asset management portion. There's a lot that goes into buying assets. There's a lot more that goes into managing those assets efficiently and managing the management company. Second way is you can pay a third-party asset manager, right? You pay maybe a point, 2 points, 3 points, whatever it is, depending on the deal, and you'll pay a third-party asset manager to manage the manager. Again, if you're new in this is definitely a finesse type of like role, right? Being an asset manager and managing a management company can be very political, right? You don't want to stick your finger in their pie, because property managers get really pissed. I mean, we had 4,500 doors in DFW with the same management company. And, even then I asked them, hey, do this or go over and above and you expect this. And, they don't like that. I didn't make a lot of friends as an asset manager, right? I'm managing grown people doing their job that they've been doing for 10, 20 years, right? And I'm not the business owner. And so, it's a delicate thing. You really got to maneuver and try not to upset the tides. And so a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, I don't want you guys to take this as I'm teaching you exactly what to do, because I'm not. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, I promise you that. I'm definitely not the richest guy in the room. This is more money in this room than I've ever probably had in one individual room. But I'm just going to share with you kind of what I've learned in the 2 years working with Mike, right? Like I'm very humbled by having that opportunity to work with Mike. I really do consider him one of the best out here in this business. I just really want to share with you guys because I've gotten a lot of feedback saying, hey, what do we do now? And Brad and I were having some coffee the other day and sitting down, and he was talking about his marketing manager, and I'm explaining to him some of the things we're doing with the website. And he says, well, I used to use this guy, and he got me here, and I'm doing great now, and I don't really need him anymore. Like, I'm in a different place now. And I said, Brad, you got to think to yourself, like, what do you think your students that are already buying deals and making money, what do you think they're thinking? Like, they probably are thinking the same thing. Like, it's important that we continually try to provide more content, more value to the students. It takes a lot to build up enough trust to give somebody 25 grand to mentor you, right? And then when you get to the point where you need a different kind of mentoring, but in the same field, you don't really want to switch and go, well, this guy taught me how to buy them, and now this guy's going to teach me how to manage them, right? It takes a lot of trust, and there's a lot of value in the network. You don't want to leave that or have to feel like you need to leave that to get more value, right? You want to be able to continue getting more value from the group and the mentor you're already working with. And so I just told Brad, I said, I've got some experience. I'm not the smartest guy, but I can help, put this together. I can go over some of the old sheets we used to look at, some of the things that I used to look at, some of the things Mike taught me, and we can put something together for the students. You've got experience. He owns deals. A lot of our big player syndicators, they own a lot of deals. There's something that we have here that we can continue to give value, right? And so it's kind of like a pivoting point. We got an office for Sumrock now, which is new as of last week, and some of you don't know that. So we do have an office now. It's at the Crescent in Uptown Dallas. We've hired some admin staff. We're redoing the website. We're putting together new videos for you guys, new training videos. So I'm excited about it. Like, I've been in real estate my whole life, but what I really love is building businesses. Like, I'm about as OCD as it gets. They call me Carl Dean the Machine because I just love working. As crazy as that is, I love what I do. I love building companies. I love making things better. I love being able to help people and see people succeed. There's nothing I love more than hearing some of the success stories I hear out in the audience. Like, I'm meeting with people and I'm like, damn, dude, like, mother of two, here without her husband, kicking ass, buying deals. Like, that just is so inspiring to me. Honest to God, it really is. So what more could I want out of life? I get to do what I love around smart people who teach me, and I can help teach them, and we all just kind of work together, and we just keep growing, and I just love being able to be a part of that. It's a blessing, honestly. Another way you can pay for asset management, you can pay a co-sponsor. So again, a lot of you guys raised your hands. That's something you do. I put a co-sponsor that has the time and experience in the little, whatever those things are called. I'm not a grammar guy. I'm really not. I don't pay attention to things that don't forward, but a lot of you guys are paying a co-sponsor who is kind of learning as you go, right? Like, you guys are intelligent people, right? You're all intelligent people. You join the program, you're investing in deals. But sometimes we're, saying, hey, Joe, you've just got more time than us, and you're in the area. We want you to be the asset manager, and you're kind of like, learning as you go. And it is what it is. You got to do what you got to do, right? You just got to keep moving forward. You got to keep making money. You got to keep doing deals. That's what the game's about. Or you can pay later with potential losses. Now, I'm not saying that if you don't have an asset manager that you're going to lose on your deal. I mean, property managers are there to do a job. And if they do it, then you should be winning, and you should be hitting your forecast numbers. But it always helps to have somebody holding that person accountable. Because at the end of the day, the person who's leasing that unit for whatever price or whatever, it could boil down to your investment in the hands of a $14 or $12 an hour employee. Sometimes even a temp who's there for the day, who just wants a leasing commission, right? And so you got to be conscious of that stuff, and it helps to have an asset manager to hold people accountable. So what does the asset manager do? Now, I wrote down some stuff that I do and have done for Mike, and then I also kind of looked at some additional asset management positions online just to make sure, because I did a lot of stuff for Mike. I was kind of his right-hand guy. I did construction stuff all over the map. So bi-weekly meetings with property managers. Now, this is not going on site and meeting with the on-site staff. That is one thing that will piss off your property manager. That is not something I recommend ever. It just flusters the staff, right? You want to keep them focused. You want to make sure you obey the chain of command. There's nothing that pisses off your property manager more than you going and starting to talk to the on-site staff instead of talking to the regional about an issue or a question you have. Now, I have broken this rule several times before, and I have had some meetings that were not fun, because sometimes I couldn't figure out what the root of an issue was until I went to the property and started drilling in, right? And you go to and you talk to the leasing staff and you say, walk me through like I'm a new tenant. Well, this is leaking and this broke and this fell down, and you don't see that stuff on your reports, right? And sometimes the regional manager isn't paying enough attention to see those things, and sometimes that's really the only way you can get to the root of the issue. That being said, I do not recommend this. I recommend you talking to your regional and just holding them accountable and saying, well, have you done the lease walk with them? Have you gone through the units, right? What do the common areas look like that they're going to be passing through and passing by when they're looking at a place to live, right? You want these little intricate details that you don't see in spreadsheets, you don't see in your management reports. Site visits. This is about once a month. Now, when you take over a property and you're purchasing a property and it's a new deal, this is a little bit more frequent. I might come once a week, then once every 2 weeks, and then once a month. If it's a good deal, if it's running efficiently, if you kept the manager that was already in place, which is very helpful, I'll get into that in a little bit, you might not need to be there every 2 weeks, right? Once a month is pretty much the norm. You want to show up on site, just look at the grounds, take some pictures. If you see anything that stands out, just put eyes on it, right? And if you're not available, it always helps to have, either a regional manager you can reach out to or someone local and say, hey, I was just curious. Occupancy looks a little sluggish, curious if you could just drive the property. And you'd be surprised. Like, I've driven properties and the common area right by the dog park, some kids threw white paint all over the place and they got trash all over there, and it's one of those little things that only the leasing manager sees because she's the only person walking the units with the tenants or potential tenants, and the manager doesn't even know about it, right? And it's one of those things where, again, it just helps to put eyes on it. Hold people accountable. It's one of the biggest things. Appropriate and monitor rent. So again, this is something that as an asset manager you should be keeping an eye on. You should be the one that's saying, hey, this is where we want our rents, right? This is our goal, right? In order to get to that goal, this is where we need to be every month consistently. And you need to make sure that you're keeping an eye on the comps in the area. And I think that's actually one of my later bullet points. I just kind of messed it up. But managed capital products. So maintenance and value add. So obviously you set aside capital when you purchase an asset and you plan on doing X, Y, and Z with that capital. You want to make sure it's going to the right place, right? You want to make sure that it's being efficiently spent. It's being spent in the right areas at the right times. It's very, 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 very important. And again, I'll get into all this stuff in a little bit more detail here. Monitor unit renovations, pace, cost, and premium. So these are just common things that I think about, and I'm like, well, duh, of course you want to pay attention to this stuff, but sometimes you just put too much trust in the property manager, and you need to know as an asset manager, you should be paying attention to how fast they're doing this, the cost, the premiums, what are you getting for this? If I'm putting $5,000 into a unit, I better be getting my $150 rent bump, right? And there's a lease trade-out report that I'll show you guys in another slide that I look at and hold very dearly to my weekly and monthly reporting. It's just one of those things. You just got to constantly keep an eye on it because things happen. I worked with Valiant is one of the better management companies for top tier guys, right? These they don't even manage C-class assets. They don't manage anything under 200 units. These guys are very, very put together, and they've made mistakes several times. They just make mistakes. There's a lot of people. You can have the smartest person in the world running that company, but again, he has employees, and those regionals have employees. And it boils down, and so mistakes happen, so you have to keep an eye on this stuff. Monitor comps, again, that goes into the rents. If the comps are putting their rents below yours, right? How many of you guys are in deals that are on rental management software, like LRO? Okay, so that's the bigger deals, right? A lot of these smaller deals, you don't need rental management software. And, I have good thoughts about rental management software and I have bad thoughts about it, right? If you have a competent veteran manager on that deal, maybe it's not needed. I like to be quick on my feet. I like to be able to pivot when I need to pivot. And sometimes when you have a rental management software, it's saying, hey, we're showing this unit is fully occupied, so we're going to jack your rents up. And it's, the neighbor next door is checking your rents every day. Their management office is checking your rents and going, okay, let's just put them $25 lower. And they're killing you. And I've been in deals where we're right next to another deal that's very comparable to our deal, and it's like, why are we not getting occupancy right now? We've got a ton of traffic and no occupancy. Well, when you look at it and you start to dig into it, you realize that every single day, whatever your rent is showing in the Yardi or the system, whatever system you guys are using, the next door neighbor is undercutting you by 25 bucks, and their comps and their units are similar. And so being able to make that pivot quickly is very, very useful. And I've pulled LRO off of some big deals before. And in that Hearst deal, there was a deal in there on the slides. Let's go back. No, let's not do that. A Hearst deal. It was like a B+ deal in Hearst, and it was the nicest deal in the area. And we had it on LRO and rental management software, and we were doing our unit upgrades, and I'm struggling with it, and I'm like, well, we're renovating units, and then there's classic units being leased, and the software doesn't pick up on that. They don't know which ones are classic and which ones are leased, and so it's, you can do, well, this one has an upgrade charge on it, and this, but it just, sometimes the system doesn't work how you want it to work. So we pulled that deal off of LRO, set our rents manually, and that thing's been crushing it, and it was struggling. We had, go ahead.
Finish your conversation after the question.
Well, I'm just saying, with the LRO, with the rental management software, you just got to watch that stuff, because a lot of times you don't need to. I mean, if your rents are every single day, a lot of people will walk into an office and say, hey, what are your rents for a 2-bedroom? And you say, well, they change every day, and they're like, nah, they're turned off by that. So just keep an eye on that type of stuff if you are on LRO, because sometimes it will lease classic units because of their occupancy. They'll lease classic units higher than your rehab units. And nothing pisses off investors more than giving them a report that they can read through and understand, and seeing that this classic unit rented higher than the unit you just put $4 grand into, right? That doesn't make sense, but the LRO will do that at times, so just keep an eye on that. Go ahead.
A while ago you mentioned that the next door comp was dropping $25. So how do you avoid pricing?
Well, I mean, it gets to a point where, again, that's one of those deals where I feel like I should take that off LRO. Because you gotta fight fist to fist in that kind of situation. You can't expect LRO to, you just can't leave it in the hands of a system. It just doesn't always work. Sometimes you need a manual human touch of someone who knows the market. Like the manager on that specific deal, she was very good friends with the manager on the deal next door. She knew what was going on. She's like, I'm telling you guys, like, we're paying $400 a month for this LRO, and it's putting us in a bind. Like, her and I talk, and we could be on the same page. But LRO is putting me here, and she keeps going here. There's not much I can do about that. You need to give me the freedom of being able to set these rents manually. And when you have a veteran manager on a deal like that, that is extremely important to listen to what they're saying, because nobody knows that deal better. This particular manager was on the deal when Blackstone owned it, and then they sold it to another group, and then that group sold it to us. She'd been on there the entire time, like 10, 12 years, whatever it was. So you have to really take that and understand and listen to what they're saying. There are times where you will take these deals over and you have an experienced, educated veteran manager who's got gray hair and knows what she's doing, and is not, the 23-year-old manager that they just brought in, and you have to listen to her, right? You have to really take her advice. And I'm not saying, hey, change your forecast or change your budget, change your rents or anything like that. Take it with a grain of salt, but listen to what they have to say.
What's the name of the software?
The rental management software?
You said Arrow.
LRO it's called. It's like Rainmaker or something. We just know it as LRO in the industry. Yeah. Again, it's more for B-class, A-class deals. A lot of units, something where you might have a new manager on staff where she doesn't know how to really set the rents and time all that. And then assist with due diligence. Every type of due diligence. I'm making budgets, I'm looking at the deal, I'm looking at what needs to be done. Is there an opportunity for carports? Is there an opportunity for extended patios? What can we do to this deal to add value? That's all an asset manager should ever give a shit about. Excuse my language. You want to provide more value to the property. You want to be on top of the property manager and not on top of them like a tiger, with your claws in them, because again, you will get fired if you do not have a lot of units and you're not somebody who holds weight with them. But you want to always be trying to drive more revenue. In any way, shape, or form you can, that's within the legal law, you want to be adding value to that property. You should see some of the due diligence videos that I've done for Mike and these guys, like driving to Waco, putting on a Coca-Cola hat and walking into a 400-unit deal and pretending like I just took a job at Coca-Cola across the street, and me and my wife, and I'm making videos for my wife so she can see, because she couldn't be here today. And I got 15-minute videos that I edit on iMovie on my phone. And I'm like walking through every unit. Oh, are there any other units like this? Or do you have any upgraded units that are a little bit nicer? Well, could I save money if I got one of these classic units? And all these little dumb questions that this manager has no idea what I'm doing. I'm figuring out, are there classic units here? What's the rent bumps they're getting for the premium units, right? Like, how many of those are there? What do those look like, right? What's the fee? There's so many ways to spin that. I will say that's probably one of the most valuable things that some of you guys can do when you're looking at a property doing due diligence is go there and act like a tenant and don't dress nice. You know, I mean, you got to play the role. Honest to God, if you can play the role and be believable, they'll tell you whatever you want. They'll tell you how many people are in there. You know, anything you can imagine, and just be strategic in your conversation, right? The biggest thing I always want to know is, you know, what are you charging for these upgraded units? Can I save money on a classic unit? What do those look like? Do you have any of those I could see? Even if they're not finished, I'd love to just see one, just see what I'm getting into, and just kind of keep pronging them. Right? They're just going to keep leaking information. So weekly KPI reports. So Mike had me he gave me, hey, here's the script of what we're doing. I need you to take this and make it better and more thorough. And this is something that I put together, and I was able to work with the regional managers to continually monitoring these things that we're about to go over. And I call this the pulse of the business. As an asset manager, I had this in live Google Docs. I had it in spreadsheets. I had it on my whiteboard. I mean, I had this in every area that I would look. Like, I constantly had this pulse in front of my eyes, because that's the only way you start to recognize trends, right? When things start to drop or things start to dip or you see something that's off, right? This what I'm about to go through is extremely important. So if you are interested in the success of your deal, be ready to take some notes, because I'm going to go through it pretty quick. Again, I only have an hour to share with you 5,000 hours of stuff that I've learned from Michael Becker, so be prepared here. Physical occupancy is a very easy one. Obviously, that is a no-brainer. You want to be keeping an eye on your physical occupancy. I'm not even going to get too much into that. Your 60-day trend. Now, this comes in a lot of different forms. I've looked at some of the stuff that Brad has, that he gets from the management company, and some of you other guys that have, kind of reports that you get. And everybody does it a little different. Some people do a 90-day forecast. I think that's just a little too far out in the future. So if those of you, does anybody not know what a 60-day forecast means or is not comfortable with the term? Okay, so I'll go into it a little bit. So a 60-day forecast is basically saying how many people are scheduled to move out in the next 60 days and how many people are scheduled to move in. And so that is your new trend occupancy. So there's your physical occupancy. Let's say it's at 93, right? But you have 11 people moving out in the next 2 months and only 4 moving in. So your trend is 89. So you constantly want to be keeping track of your trend, because when you're going into like winter months, for example, it's slow traffic, right? Things are about to slow down. I don't recommend doing any interior upgrades going into November, December, and January. You will not get the rent bumps that you want to see when the traffic is low and you need occupancy, right? So scale back on that. And looking at the 60-day trend is kind of what helps you know where you're at going into those slow months. So on some deals, my biggest thing this time of year, and really 2 months ago, is starting to look at the trend and saying, okay, where is this deal going to end up in winter? Because I don't want to be sitting in January looking at 89 or 90% occupancy. I want to do everything I can to get as many people in there, because I know it's going to be slow traffic. So I might scale back on my rents. That 60-day trend is going to tell you when to push the gas and when to push the brake, right? You look at these deals, again, you look at these numbers every single day, and when you start to see that trend start to dip, sometimes you're like, okay, let's scale back. Let's not push so hard on the renewals. Let's start to scale back on the upgrades, and let's make sure that this thing is occupied going into the slow months, because you don't want it to be lower than 90. 90 is the cutoff. Always keep that in your mind. 90 should always be the cutoff. So watch your 60-day trend. Economic occupancy and total amount delinquent. So again, I have sheets for this stuff, and I have to create my own, because it's kind of material of SPI. But I will put together some sheets for you guys, and I'll talk to Brad about how we can implement all this stuff into a course or whatever we're going to do. I have no idea, but my goal is to help you guys through the process of managing the assets and at least be knowledgeable of what to look for. So economic occupancy is basically who's paying rent, right? So you might have a deal that's a C-class deal that's 90% occupied, but the economic occupancy is 72, which means a lot of people aren't paying rent. And so on my sheet, every week that I get from the managers, I have them put in economic occupancy and total amount delinquent. When I check that on January 1st, and the economic occupancy is 40 grand, I'm not going to panic because I know people are still paying their rent, right? So not everybody pays it on the 1st. They might pay it 1st through the 5th. If I check that on the 20th of the month and it's still in the 30s or 20s, something's wrong. People aren't paying rent, and somebody in the management company, because they want to keep occupancy high a lot of times, are not evicting the people or following procedures in which they should to get those people out. So if I continually see a deal where the economic occupancy is, in the 80s near the end of the month, that means that somebody's not following up with the evictions. Somebody needs to be more aggressive. We need to be setting out more evictions. We need to get the people who are not paying rent out of the property. Because 90% occupancy to me doesn't mean shit if we're at 79% occupancy economically and only 79% of the people are paying rent. You got to keep that in mind. So that's something you should always be watching. Your economic occupancy and the total amount delinquent. The economic occupancy should grow as the month goes on, and the amount delinquent should go down. Right? Does that make sense? The manager does. I don't. Again, as the asset manager, I'm high level. I only want to see high level. You guys do the dirty work. I just want to say, hey, there's something that you need to pay attention there. Go look at this. Hey, what's up with this? This doesn't make sense. This isn't adding up to me. What's the reason for this, right? Like, you don't want to, hey, I want to see the list. Like, you leave it to the managers. The manager has that report. So the rent roll will show the amount delinquent for every person. That rent roll showing that is what creates, obviously, your economic occupancy and your total amount delinquent. Make sense?
But how do you help increase the occupancy as asset manager?
How do you increase the occupancy as an asset manager? Yeah. It depends. So obviously, scaling back rents is one way that if you're in a bind, right? If you're in a bind, you're looking to sell your deal, and you're like, your rents are at the top of the market, and you're like, hey, I'm really wanting to sell this deal, but I know I got to keep the occupancy above 90 for them to get financing. Maybe I just cut back on the rents, $20, $25 or something. Maybe you do like a gift card. There's all kinds of promotional things you can do with marketing and all that. But scaling back rents is obviously the quickest way to get occupancy, and then pushing a little harder on your marketing. Vacant and ready. So extremely, extremely important, you guys. It's one of those things where you see it on the sheet and you're kind of just browse through it and you're like, okay, that makes sense. The number one reason for most of these C-class deals, when people are going, you got to think like a tenant, okay? If I'm a person who makes 40 grand a year and I live check to check and I have a young child, right? I need to move when I need to move. I don't have 2 weeks. I'm not the best planner, right? Like the type of demographics that we're dealing with as tenants need places to move into quickly. The number one reason I saw a lot of struggle across a lot of properties is tenants would come and there's nothing available to rent. Not to say that there's nothing available in another week or another 2 weeks. There's nothing available because it's not ready. There's vacants, but they're not ready. So if you don't have anything ready for me to move in this week or tomorrow, right, and you got work orders and whatever else, if they tell you we have nothing we can show, I'm leaving. If I'm a tenant, I'm leaving every single time. They don't show a unit that's not ready to show. They just don't. A lot of managers will not do that, and that's probably not a bad thing. But in that case, you need to make sure that if you have 11 vacant units and see 0 ready, that's a problem. You should have at least one floor plan of each type ready for move-in, ready to view, ready to show. If you don't, you're hurting yourself. If your manager doesn't, they're hurting you. So keep an eye on that. It's very important. Total upgrades units to date. This is like more of a high-level thing that I look at every month, but at the same time, I track this on a weekly basis. I want to see how many units were turned last week, how many units were turned this week. And the only reason I want to see that is I want to keep people accountable. If I see 4 units that were turned last week, I'm like, great, kick ass. And I see 0 this week and 1 next week, I'm like, what happened there, right? And that's a situation where they might say, well, we had a lot of work orders. It just went from being spring to summer, and all the ACs went on, and ACs started breaking. Okay, great, I understand that. That's a valid concern, that's a valid reason. At the same time, you need to think to yourself, am I losing money? Is this a valuable time where I should be proactive in this situation and say, hey, let's bring in a third-party renovation crew who is somewhere around the same budget that we have for our hourly guys, and have them on standby in case these work orders go through the roof when you know everybody's turning on those ACs, so where you can keep up with your unit turns. Because the most value you're going to get from turning those units is going to be in those months, April, May, June, July. Right? That's when people get their tax checks. That's when people are moving. That's when people are getting their kids into school. And so that's going to be your best traffic time. It's also the same time that people start turning on ACs. And everybody knows what happens in C-class and lower B-class properties when people start turning on ACs. Work orders go through the roof. Right? So you want to keep an eye on that and make sure, hey, if we're paying 2 guys to do this hourly, we're buying the materials, it ends up costing us, I don't know, $2,000, $3,000, let's say. But we can get Joe to come in here, buy the materials, and he can do it for $2,300, right? A couple $100 more maybe. I can deal with that because it's more valuable to me to have those units done and to not slack at this time of the year. Because if I'm holding this deal for 2 years, my ass is in gear. Like, I don't have time for you to figure out work orders. I need to turn these units, right? I don't want to be leasing classic units. If I have a 50-unit schedule that I'm trying to upgrade on this deal, I don't have time to pull back on that for work orders. So just be prepared and have an alternate strategy and talk about it with your manager. Hey, is there a third-party company you work with that can turn these units in case the work orders get off the walls and these guys can't keep up? I want to make sure you take that opportune time to continue to upgrade those units. Again, total units turned and upgraded previous week, the same thing. Go ahead, Charles.
The impression that we get monthly reports. I've only done this a couple of times.
As the asset manager, so this is another thing. You guys might get monthly reports. Some of you guys get bi-monthly, whatever the case may be. Most of you that are investors are going to get monthly reports from the manager. An asset manager earns his money. And he does so by going in to Yardi or going into their software or pulling those reports himself, putting them in his sheets himself and saying, hey guys on my team, I want you to know high level I'm watching this stuff. Here's what I'm noticing. Here's what we should be gearing up for. I've already talked to the manager about this. We have a guy on standby who can turn these units in case work orders go off the limb, right? Like you, as an asset manager, your job is to do over and above. You don't just come back and say, hey, they said they're doing this and they're doing that, we're good. Hey, I got the report, here's the report, we're good. Don't worry, everything's still good. We're 90% occupied, things are good. Because when you start lifting up the hood and peeling back layers, you're like, well, it's good, but it could be better. And the difference between good and better when you're talking about an asset is substantial. When you're talking about adding $100 a month on a rent, right, or doing 5, 10 units a month at that rate, that's a substantial amount of money when you go to sell that deal, right? We all know that. So although things could be reporting good and look good, they can always be better. Now, that being said, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so I'm always like, we can do better, we can do better. As soon as you did something great and made us a ton of money, I'm like, quick high five, now let's get back to doing better. And that will drive people insane. Don't be like me, okay? Don't be trying to drive people insane like, oh, we did a great job, well, let's keep doing better and keep finding more issues. Again, it is a finesse. There is a very political thing when it comes to being an asset manager and communicating things with a manager, right? You cannot go in there and say, oh, great job. Okay, well now I want you to do this, focus on this, focus on this. Sean Mabrek, who's Mike's partner, smartest guy. I'll take a water break for a second. Guy's the smartest guy I've ever met. I swear to Jesus. The smartest person I've ever met in my entire life when it comes to a spreadsheet, analyzing deals. Sean Mabrek, Mike's partner. The guy is a genius, and I forget where I was going with this. But the dude's smart. Oh yeah, perfect, thank you for that. I'm ADD, if you guys haven't noticed. So Sean used to tell me, hey Carl, the managers are calling me, they're like bitching, you're like driving them too hard, you're pushing too hard, and I'm like, well, there's all these issues. He goes, here's what I want you to do. Pick the 3 top things, the most important things. Don't ask them about, hey, why didn't you get the flag up already, or why didn't you fix that thing? He's picked the 3 most important things every time you go into your bi-weekly meeting and address those 3 things. As much as you want to just, well, and then also this, he goes, just don't do it. You gotta pick the 3 most important things, and it's politics. I'm telling you, man, it's politics. Because if that manager doesn't like you and you start getting under their skin and pain in their ass, it's not gonna go good, right? And switching management companies is the last resort. It's not fun, right? You go from one to another and you're like, well shit, it's not any better really. right? It's better to learn how to work with that manager. If you can salvage that relationship, there's something not going your way, communicate and say, these are my concerns and here's why I feel that way. Is there something we can do that will make sense? I see so many people who go into a project and say, hey, Joe, I want you to do this job. Joe comes in, does the job. You look at the job after Joe leaves, she looks like shit. He didn't do it like I wanted to. Call somebody else. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. That's a revolving, turning door. And with property managers, it absolutely does not work. You want to communicate your concerns, communicate why these things are important to you, and communicate with your manager so you guys can work together, right? Because going off and saying, well, they're not doing this and not doing this, and they're not doing this like I want them to do, and I'm just going to find another manager. That's a nightmare. That's going to set you back. That's not good for your investors. What have you done to try to solve that issue before you've gotten to that point? All right. Go ahead.
How do you communicate if, let's say, your regional just doesn't return your emails, your text messages? Then if it's, let's say, property management company policy that if you are contacting them too often, let's say every day, every other day, they start just to ignore you.
Yeah, that's, again, it's, when I say it's finesse, you guys, when I say it's politics, again, I can be really annoying to a lot of people because I'm like fast paced. They call me Dean the Machine because I literally am, nobody's ever waiting on me. I'm constantly up somebody's ass, right? And you can do that in a lot of scenarios. But in property management, when you're dealing with these regionals, you gotta save it, man. You gotta save it, you gotta be calculated, and you gotta take it to your bi-weekly meeting and say, okay, here's some of the concerns I've noticed over the last couple weeks. Or maybe you need to set the table again and say, listen, I wasn't really sure how this interaction was supposed to go between us when I took on this deal, and this is my first deal, whatever the case may be. Can we have a meeting so we can kind of reset? Because I've learned a few things, and I want to just make sure that the regional knows I'm not trying to breathe down your neck. I'm not trying to do your job. I'm not trying to put my finger in your pie. I'm just trying to make sure I better understand the scenario here and what's the best way to communicate with you. And then you sit down at a bi-weekly meeting and you say, okay, here are my concerns. Here are the high-level things that I'm looking at, right?
How often have you replaced a property management company? And can you share a few experiences of things that are doing bad so you went to the last resort and replaced them?
Well, Mike switched property management companies one time, and that was before I got there. I, to be completely frank, had my hand in the air to switch again. And I said, we need to work in another group and we need to see what's on the other side of the coin. And Mike said, trust me, we don't want to do that. Like, it's just, it doesn't get better, right? Sometimes property management companies, especially in this market, especially in some of these hot markets, they're growing just as fast as all these apartment investors are, right? They're taking on more and more and more and more and more because there's so many new owners, right, coming to them. And so you just have to understand and be a little patient, right? Don't let it, take your asset in the dumps, but be patient. They're learning as well. Now, at the same time, if there's an issue with the regional, right, and it's a continuous issue, and you feel like it's not, that just doesn't make sense. That's not right. I don't feel like he's really answering my calls, right? Like if it's something that's a valid concern and he's just kind of not being a great regional, fire his ass. I mean, I've gone to the property manager 100 times, and I'm not saying you can't fire him, obviously, but you can address the concerns with the owner of the company and say, here's why I feel this way, right? I don't think that they do a bad job. They just don't communicate with me enough, right? They're not answering the calls for me. Is there something that I could do better before we go to me saying I would rather have a different regional? Is there something that I can do better? Can we all sit down and talk about it? I'll tell you right now, the best thing you guys can do is just communicate, because there's so many people who feel a certain way. They have this angst and this animosity, this resentment that starts to build up, and they don't say anything, and it just gets worse. I'm the first guy who's going to say, let's just sit down, let's talk about this. What are we doing? We're all sitting here whispering how pissed off we are, and you're annoyed by me, and I'm annoyed by you, and it's like, can we just sit down at the table and figure this out? Like, what's the issue? Am I bugging you too much? Well, how about the issues that I've addressed? Are these things that are like, what's the process here? You know what I mean? And just hash it out and understand how each other works. It's the best thing I can tell you. Go ahead.
If you have a slide on this, we can save it for later.
Yeah.
But since, as you described, it's hard to get out of that relationship with your property manager, do you have some information on how to pick the right property manager?
It depends on the market. I mean, every property manager is different. The thing that I look for when I look to hire a property manager is I say, what are the monthly reports that you send out? I want to see an example of a monthly report that you send out to an investor, right? What does that look like? What does that include? because I've looked at some of the reports that Brad gets, and they're not everything that I would want to see. If I was Brad's asset manager, there's things that I would have to manually go in and gather to be able to put together the data that I look at as an asset manager, right? Like I don't see a traffic report in there showing what traffic sources are bringing in traffic and what's converting. So there's again, and I'll get into it here a little bit more. Am I on good pace? Okay. Are you guys following me so far? Is this valuable?
Yes.
All right, good.
And everyone, we are going to have time for Q&A at the end of this too, so.
Yeah, cool. All right, on notice and pre-leased. So again, this is just one of those things where it kind of falls into the trend. You just want to obviously keep an eye on how many people are on notice and how many are pre-leased. And I'll tell Mike, he'll say, hey, how's Frankfurt doing? I was like, well, we're net -11 this month, which means with our pre-leased and with our on notice, I'm looking at it like, okay, when you factor in both those to our current occupancy, we're net -11 tenants this week. So we maybe got to push a little bit harder on marketing or see if we can do a Facebook thing or whatever. I mean, you'd be surprised, honestly, especially in C-Class, how good of an approach it is to have your managers do a walkthrough, like a FaceTime Live on the Facebook for your, and some of you guys don't have even websites for the properties, which is fine, but have a Facebook for the property, because when the manager or the leasing agent goes in there and says, hey, this is our new units and our rents are da-da-da-da-da, I've had a lot of success from that. Like I've gotten a lot of traffic from those type of things. So just, always keep an open mind and consider that stuff with social. So I have these two bunched together and this beautiful little clip art that I popped in here, because that's really what it is, man. It's this here is all a bottleneck. And so I'm constantly watching these things to figure out where the issue is, and I'll explain it to you. So, total traffic, right? If I'm not getting enough traffic, that's an indicator that I need to be doing better marketing. Now, there's certain deals that we have that are just off the service drive and they get a ton of traffic, and I don't have to do a lot of marketing. Every single deal that you guys are going to do is different. There's never an exact same scenario. We've purchased deals that are like, dude, everything about this thing makes sense. This is a slam dunk, home run, easy deal. We've done this 100 times. It's exactly like deal over here in the other side of town, and it wasn't. We had to boost our marketing budget like 400% just to push enough traffic to the area because it was kind of just in a little weird corner. And you had to take a side road to get there, right? There's not traffic passing by the deal every day. So I had to adjust. I had to make that adjustment. But if you have a lot of traffic and not a lot of showings, that's an indicator of, how about this? Anybody tell me what that might be an indicator of? A lot of traffic. Units not ready. Okay, that's the number one. So if I see a ton of traffic and not a lot of showings, I know either you don't have units ready, or your leasing staff is too busy with the traffic and there's nobody there to fill in, right? Because sometimes if there's only two people and the manager's talking to one person and the leasing staff's on a tour and you walk in, it just so happens to be Saturday morning when there's a lot of traffic, maybe that hurts you, right? So I'm not saying that there's anything you could technically do about that, but it's good to understand what could cause these potential bottlenecks. So a lot of showings, so then total applied. So maybe there's tons of traffic, there's tons of showings, and there's only half applied. What's the issue? What's the feedback? You have to rely on your property manager and your regional to say, hey, can you get, and again, they're not gonna think of this. This CAPS course that I took is like, I guess I was the only person in there who wasn't like a regional manager for the last 20 years. They were like, you're an asset manager? What the hell are you doing here? I'm like, well, I just wanna learn what these guys are learning so I can better work with them, right? But total applied, again, if that number's low and there's a ton of showings, there's either something wrong with the units, there's got to be something there, right? So you want to ask your regional and give them instruction like, hey, next time you're at the deal, could you just ask why there's only so many people applying and there's so many high showings? Like, is it feedback about the common areas? Did they not like that there wasn't carports? I mean, what was the feedback there? It's very, very important to try to get this feedback any way you can. But again, go through the regional, go through the steps, go through the normal steps. Don't put your finger in their pie. I've done it before. It doesn't end up well. But again, these are things that are bottlenecks. And approved and pending apps, maybe our marketing. So if this number's low, but total applied is a little higher, then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe we're not getting qualified traffic. So where is our marketing being spent? What's that?
Do they follow with the tenants? Why
They should. They should. They don't always, but they should. You know what I mean? So, if they're not approved or they're approved, they're obviously going to let them know, right? But they don't always mark it in the system. I wish they did, but it's not a perfect world, and people make mistakes, and people don't always do their job the way they're supposed to do it, and people get busy. But if you don't see a lot of approved or pending apps, I need to look at my marketing and say, okay, where are we marketing? Like, what is that hitting? What's the target of that marketing? Is that giving me crap tenants that are just not in the right areas? Do I need to switch that up? I need to look at something. There's something off there. So these are all indicators of some sort or another of a bottleneck, right? Something's not going right. Month-to-date in and out and month-to-date renewals. Again, just something that I have in my sheet, so I included it on the slide. I want to know how many people moved in this month, how many people moved out this month, and how many people renewed this month. Another reason I want to keep an eye on this is like with renewals. You know, when I'm turning and burning on a property, let's say I buy a property. Now this, I don't know if this is in my slides in the future here, but when I buy a property, let's say it's September, right? And I know that it's getting ready to get cold and it's getting ready to get slow. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of that time to do all my exterior CapEx while traffic's slow. Right? I'm not going to do any interior stuff. I'm going to focus on all the exterior projects and get them over while the traffic is slow. And then when the traffic starts to pump back up again, come tax season, I'm going to go in and start hammering those units. Right? I want to push those renewals as hard as I possibly can to get those people out. Now, I don't want to kick out little old Betsy, who's been here for 25 years, but she needs to know, like, hey, listen, we love you. We're pushing everybody else to 75 renewals. I'm going to do it for you for 45 because you're a great tenant. Some of you may make that decision, some of you may not. I'm a businessman. At the end of the day, I don't have to be the bad guy in that situation. I'm not telling you to kick out old people. It's not a smart thing to do. It's not a very nice thing to do. But you have to just make sure that your manager is pushing those renewals hard because you want the opportunity to turn those units. And if I look at my sheet and see 20 renewals and my guys aren't turning units, I'm like, what's going on? Why are you renewing these people? And why are those renewal rates not where I want them to be? Like, you've got to push harder on those renewals. Set the bar, right? You, the owner, you're the asset manager, whatever the case may be, you have to set the bar. If you don't give them instruction, they're going to tell you what needs to happen. Now, I'm not saying that they don't know what they're doing, because they do. They're property managers. That's what you pay them for. But sometimes you also need to keep in mind that that leasing manager gets paid a leasing bonus for leasing units. So she's going to be the last person with her hand in the air saying we should push the rents, because she doesn't care. She doesn't get anything from it. You are the only person that benefits from them pushing the units. It's a harder job for the manager. It's a harder job for the management company. So you just sometimes need to say, hey, I want $50 renewals at this time of the year. When we get to December and these slower months, we can scale that back and do 25. But right now I want $50 renewals, because if they don't like it, they can move. And then if they move, we get in there, we rehab that unit, and we get a $125 rent bump, right? That's how this works. That's how you turn units. That's how you get to the lease. Just hold it to the last, until the end here. So, my most favorite report. Now, I put this up here as an example because this is extremely hard to explain, but this is ultimately my favorite report. Now, this is something that I put together because Mike kept asking me, like, hey, what are our lease trade-outs? And I'm like, what do you mean? Okay, I get it. I start to get it. Like, okay, let me put something together so I can give you a quick and honest answer. So a couple things to keep in mind here. When I'm looking at this report, every month I would summarize a 70-page PDF document with every single Yardi report that you could print out. The traffic, the conversions, everything you could think of, your T12, your budget, everything. And I would summarize that in like 5 bullet points, high level. Here's the stuff you need to be paying attention to. Here's where we're at. Here's how it looks. Here's what we're doing about it. When I send out those reports, the 2 things that are constantly on my monitor is this in-place rent pro forma. Year 1, year 2, year 3. What are my goals and what is my rule? I have a 90% occupancy cutoff rule, and I want to make sure that these renewals and these new leases are getting me to where I want to be. Year 1. I am constantly looking at this number as a bullseye. And if I see anything that's not going in that direction, I have to ask a question. And so this is a lease trade-out report. And again, these are just generic examples I put in here so I could explain this. So when I look at this, I see renewals. I see a 600 square foot classic on a 12-term lease that is now rented on a 6-term lease that went up $100. I'm like, damn, you got $100 for, the first thing I think about is, damn, you got $100 for a renewal? That's great. And then I look at it and I say, oh, it was a six-month lease. It's a shorter term lease. If my manager is leasing something on a shorter term, it better have an additional bump, right? You don't just renew somebody and say, oh, well, you know, they renewed and they were on a 12 and they wanted to renew just for 6. Well, they get a renewal fee and they get a rent bump fee for it being a short-term lease. So make sure you're paying attention to that. That's why I included it in here, because a lot of times I look at these numbers. This is the first column I look at. I'm like, oh, 14%, damn, that's great for a renewal. And then I have to figure out why that makes sense. Sometimes they don't make sense and you have to figure that out. This is a perfect example here. A classic 6-month lease to a 12-month lease with a $75 decrease. And I'm like, what happened there? I got a -7 and I have to look back and say, okay, well, it went from a 6 to a 12-month lease. Now, at the same time, I understand that that happens, but I also question this number here. I'm at 93 cents, and that's going to throw off my average. Luckily, we did have this one that went, it kind of reversed the effect. So, right, I have a 6-month that went to a 12-month and dropped, but I also have a 12 that went to a 6 on a renewal and dropped. And so the average of a 4% increase for a renewal is not bad. The more important number is the average here. This scares me, but I'm like, it's $1.04 for a renewal. My goal is $1.07. And with my new leases, I'm at $1.11. So averaging those two out, I'm going to be somewhere around $1.07.
What's the cutoff for a lease?
Okay, so the cutoff rule is if I'm pushing rents, if I say I have a $50 renewal that I want to do, and because I want to turn units, if my occupancy starts to get into the 90 range, I start to backpedal, right? So anytime that occupancy hits 90, I pull back and reassess. Okay, wait, let's slow down. Let's think about this. Let's try a $25 renewal for the next week and see if that, you know, helps us out a little bit. The 90% cutoff rule is extremely important. You never want to really drop below 90%. Number one, if you're selling a deal or whatever the case may be, again, you can't get good financing without 90% occupancy. So make sure that you're just paying attention to that 90% cutoff rule. Because when we first get these deals, and I'm not kidding you, there's nobody who executes this plan faster than SPI. These guys get in here, and I mean, we tear it down. Kick them out, kick them out, kick them out, flood with renewals, or flood with new leases, new tenants, and new rehabs, and we're just kicking ass, hauling ass on it. Well, a lot of times that can get us to where we're like, okay, we're getting towards 90. Let's scale back a little bit. Let's scale back. Let's let it ease off for a couple months. We're still going to turn the renewals if they decide to move out. God bless you. We're still going to turn those, but we're not going to push as hard at some of the renewals, right? And maybe we'll lease a few more classic units. That's a good way to kind of scale back and help your occupancy and saying, okay, I have 4 vacant units that I planned on rehabbing and getting my new upgraded rents. Maybe we just lease 2 of those at classic units so we can keep our occupancy above 90. So whatever the case may be, when you get into that 90 range, you need to just look at the deal and reassess.
What's the upper range of occupancy where you have to push the rents more, increase more?
So when I go into November, October, all these cold months and it starts to get slow, we're pushing all the time for 97. Some deals don't hit it, but if we got to hit at least 95, right? And you know, if it's early in the season and you're sitting at 98, your asset manager's not doing their job. Because if I'm sitting and it's May, June, July, and forgive me for some of the asset managers, and I don't mean that literally, they're not doing their job. I'm just saying, like, we could perform better, right? You don't want a 98% occupied property when you're getting all your traffic and you have money to turn those units. You need to be more aggressive, okay? Be more aggressive with your renewals. Make sure you're turning those units. The middle one here is pretty standard. I just put this in because this is a basic example. 12-month to a 12-month, I got a $50 rent increase, great, boom. That makes sure that I know my manager is doing what I told him to do. This makes sense, it's a little off because there's a reason. This makes sense, it's a little over because there's a reason. But this is what I need to make sure stays the norm. So then I look at new leases, a classic unit, 12-term, 12-term, and we got a $70 increase. Now the first thing I think about when I see this is, why the hell are we doing new leases for classic unit right now? It's June, like what we should not be doing that. And he says, and my manager, my regional, will say to me, well, dude, we got a $70 rent bump. Like, for a classic unit. A guy needed to move in like this week, and we had a classic unit that was available, and he was willing to pay $70 more. Don't you think that's worth it? Yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? Like, okay, that makes sense. So just make sure before you like, because I did a lot, lose my mind and start getting gray hairs. I'm like, dude. And they're like, well, Carl, like, look, you know, I had to learn this business. I didn't come into working with Mike with multifamily asset management experience. I took a lot of lumps over the head and pissed a lot of people off by getting gray hairs and calling people up and saying, why? Explain this to me. Why? Explain this to me. And this is what they explained to me, right? Over and over and over again. Go ahead.
Now, when you set your meeting up with your regional, you also set it up with the property manager for your vision of, hey,
we get to 90, we want to pull back a little
No,
bit?
nope, it's all regional. I communicate everything through the regional, right? They have their way of doing things. Okay. So here we have an upgraded unit that was a 12-month lease. It was 800 before, 12-month lease. We got a 150 rent bump. Great. That's where I want to be at. That $1.18 is getting me closer to my year 3 performance. Perfect. That's what I want to see. That's ideal. Here we have an upgraded unit that went from a 6-month to a 12-month. We only got a $50 rent bump. So immediately before I see this, and when I get my sheets, again, I look through everything, and I'm very horizontal with all my sheets. And I go through, before I do anything, and before I analyze anything, I just highlight everything in red that is not where it should be. That's low, there's an upgrade, there's a classic unit sold in the new leases, you know, all these things. I look at it high level, highlight red, and then I go back and try to understand what made that happen, right? So obviously I have a $50, it's an upgraded unit. Doesn't make sense. I look over. It went from a 6-month to a 12-month. So that's the justification. That's why it makes sense. This person was on a short-term lease, and they went back down to a 12-month lease. So it's only a 5% increase, but again, that 6-month to 12-month is why it makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? This is my favorite report. You constantly got to be watching your lease trade-outs. That is the #1 thing that Mike asks me every single day. What are our lease trade-outs? What are renewals? What are our lease trade-outs? Every single day he would ask me, what are our lease trade-outs? Because he just wanted to make sure we kept pushing the needle, right? People will scale back, they'll get comfortable, they'll stop pushing. If you don't tell them, hey, maybe we should reforecast, maybe we should push a little harder, they're gonna keep doing what they're supposed to be doing and keeping the assets stabilized, right? And they're gonna keep gradually pushing, but sometimes you can step in and say, look, it makes sense, like we can push a little harder here. And here's why I think so. And knowing how to look at this chart and explain it to your regional manager is gonna help you with your case.
Carl, can you share the slides after the presentation?
Sure. CapEx oversight. So a lot of this stuff I'm getting short on time, so I'm going to try to blow through this. CapEx. So we did about I implemented in 2 years that I was at Mike's firm about $4 million in CapEx. So I have a construction background. That's how I got into real estate, is through construction. I love construction. I still do construction. I build furniture. I do all kinds of crazy stuff. I love construction. So I love taking it over. Again, this is something that I got in trouble for because I would always put my finger in their pie. We can get it done cheaper. That's not the industry norm. We can get it done cheaper over here. This guy does it over here. Well, guess what? Your property manager has very, very good relationships with dependable contractors who they've worked with for long term. And sometimes you need to realize that although you can get it $1 per square foot cheaper over here, that company changed names 3 times in the last 3 years, right? They don't have an existing track record with the management company, right? You have to keep these things in mind. Right, you can't just go in there and say, well, no, Joe over here has it advertised, he can do it $1 cheaper. I want you to use Joe. Because then when it doesn't go right and Joe doesn't show up for a job and you lose a tenant because of it, you're going to be the one with egg on your face. Oh, you told us to use your contractor. Our guy never fails. He's here on time. We pay $1 more, but it makes sense, right? Property management of an asset is like a huge ship. I'm taking words right out of Mike's mouth. It's like the Titanic. You don't turn the Titanic on a dime, right? That thing has it's a slow moving turn. You can't just go in there and say, change this, and it's just not, it doesn't work like that. You know, that person has to establish a relationship and credibility with the property manager, right? So what's the bid process? Are you guys getting bids? Do you guys as owners, syndicators, especially the syndicators, syndicating deals, are you guys getting bids? Or are you guys just getting told, hey, your budget was $15K, we got it done for $15K. Okay, good, great. So, see you later, do your thing. I'll be honest, when I came to SPI, I was like, hey, where's all the invoices for all the work that we pay for? I mean, we pay for it all. And he'd be like, well, we don't store the invoices. That's the property management job. Well, I'd like to see where the invoices are because I like to keep track of this stuff, and I like just again for my own personal reasons, I want to keep track of the invoices, so I can then further when I go evaluate deals, I have a better sense of what things cost down to the penny. So if I see Joe, who's got 15 invoices in the file for painting a 1,000 square foot unit, and I know that he's averaging $950 a month or $950 a unit, but I've been budgeting $1,100, I'm like, okay, well maybe that's throwing off some of my underwriting. It's important to get these invoices and just kind of understand what you're paying across the board. You might be paying more in Dallas than you are in Fort Worth for some things, right? It's just, that's how it is, but it's good to at least be conscious of that. And it's also good when you're doing high projects, high level projects like painting, things like that. You're painting a whole exterior, a couple $100,000 or whatever it is. You should always be getting 3 bids. That regional manager should always come to you with those 3 bids and address the situation and say, hey, Joe's doing it a little bit cheaper, but he's not the fastest guy. You know, Bob has the most expensive price, and he does not play around. This guy's going to get it done quick. There's going to be no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and it's going to be ready to go by the time the heavy leasing season gets here. And you have to weigh out your options, you know. A lot of times I try to find the guy in the middle. And the thing is, when you're talking about high-level, paying jobs like this, you have a little bit of room to finagle. Every single time a manager comes to me and says, hey, I got a, Joe says he can do it for $2.25, $225,000, but John said he could do it for $190. I say, oh, go back to Joe and just say, hey, Joe, I really want to give you the job, but can you do it for like $110 to make me feel better, right? Give me some kind of deal. Just see if he bites on it. It's worth a question, right? And sometimes contractors are like, oh, they're beating me up. I don't care. It's a business. It's what I do. I want to feel like I'm getting a deal, right? And if I can show Joe that Bob gave me an invoice for 50 grand more and it's all the exact same scope, then I'm like, hey Bob, can you explain the difference? I mean, can you just meet me in the middle somewhere? Like, you be a deal person. You guys are all buying deals. You're in deals. Wait, just wait, because I got to get through this stuff. Hold on. I apologize. Just give me 1 second here. Again, how are you tracking your CapEx? So this is very, very important, and it might not be important to everybody, but if you're an owner of a deal, it's important that you're tracking the CapEx, right? You want to make sure that people are getting things done in time. A lot of lenders give you repair lists and say, you have 6 months to complete these repairs, and we're sending out an inspector. Get them done. And if you don't know where that's at, you got to keep asking the regional. That's annoying, right? Track this stuff. Create a spreadsheet like I did. And keep it as a live document and update it and put the link from the Dropbox invoice in the file, and here's the price, and here's the budget, and here's the bid, and here's what we came through, and here's what we saved, and here's the X amount of money we have on the side because we kept saving on all these. Get something together to track that, right? And then you make sure that when it comes down to time where you see the date column and you say, wow, that's not marked completed, and my note says I checked on it 2 months ago. Maybe say, hey Joe, did you guys by chance get that done? I know we're coming up on our 6th month. Just want to make sure that we're on top of the stuff for the lender. Again, having issues with time-sensitive lender repair items, that's what comes from not tracking it, right? You can't, if you're an asset manager, you're taking a fee for this stuff. If you're managing that asset and managing the manager, you're going to be expected to be the person who is proactive in this scenario, not reactive. It's not going to help anybody. Is there a process with pictures? It helps to have pictures always. Not a lot of management companies do it. It's a little over and above, I will be honest. But at the same time, I feel like it's a norm. Like if you're renovating a unit, or there's an issue that cost me $5 grand that happened and it was a pipe burst or something, whatever the case may be, over the weekend, it cost me a significant amount of money, take some pictures before. Take some pictures during, and take some pictures after, and send them to me. Send me a Dropbox link. Send me something so I can keep it on file, number one, so I can track this stuff, but also so I know. Because I'm telling you right now, if you guys ever have an insurance loss, where there's any kind of insurance loss, those guys take you for a ride. I've been in that business. We know when the insurance is paying the bill, I'm racking you. I'm getting every dollar I possibly can out of that deal. And sometimes they just fluff the hell out of it. They'll tear out walls. They don't need. I mean, it's always good to hold people accountable, and not breathe down their neck, but just say, hey, here's my process. Can you guys take some pictures during, after, and before, anytime there's a major, malfunction or something goes wrong, right? Staying up to date with lender draws and payables. Huge, huge, huge point I want to put out here. Even the best managers get behind on some of this stuff, okay? When you have CapEx money that you have inside your loan, the lender keeps in an escrow, okay? You submit proof that you completed that work, and you submit a draw for that money, and then they pay you. You say, hey, here's a lien waiver from our contractor who did the work. Here's the invoice. Sometimes we would pay the invoices because we would only do our draws every couple of months, and we didn't want the guys waiting for their money, and we'd have to show them proof of payment and our lien, all that stuff, and say, hey, we're submitting our draws. You got to make sure that your property managers are staying up to date with this stuff. And I would always go in there and say, listen, we got to square up. Like, I see all kinds of stuff happening, and we haven't done a draw in 2 months. So when I look at my account, I'm like, dude, we're raking in dough. We got money. We're chilling. How many more units you guys want to do, right? But I'm not realizing, well, we have like $250,000 in payables right now. And so we've gotten into situations, and I'm not going to mention property or anything, but we've gotten situations where we're like, oh damn, like we've done so many units, we've turned so many units that we weren't telling them to stop, and somebody lost track, and we switched regionals in the middle of this, and we have $300,000 in payables, dude, and our bank account's like 25 grand. Like, shit, we have to, hey Joe, we're gonna need you to wire us 500 grand to the account. stuff happens. You know, we did more units than we thought, or the units cost more than we thought they were going to. And, you know, that's not a call anybody here wants to ever have to make. So you want to make sure that you're keeping track of that stuff. Make sure that your accounts are square, right? A typical draw should happen every month. If you guys are doing repairs, if you guys are doing interior repairs, whatever the case may be, should happen every month, especially for your major exterior CapEx. If it's something like unit upgrades or things that you can take out of your reserve replacement or replacement reserves, that's something that happens like once a quarter, right? And so I'm not going to, you know, draw for carpet every month. I'm going to hold back and draw out of my replacement reserves for everything I can, right? If there's anything that's, and you get a schedule when you purchase a property, you get a schedule from the lender of your replacement reserves and what you can draw and when you can draw it. You can draw X amount for carpet every year. You can't draw anything for exterior paint until year 3, right? And it's different on every deal, right? But they look at it and say, okay, we're making you put replacement reserves for this deal, but you can only draw X, Y, and Z first year, and then second year, we figure this stuff's getting a little dilapidated, you can draw for some of this other stuff. Keep an eye on that and take advantage of that, because that's money sitting in the account. And you don't want to be taking money out of your regular CapEx account when there's things that you could be taking out of your reserve account, right? So stretch your dollar as far as you can. Timing of CapEx, again, is very important. When you start getting bids, before you close. Okay, don't wait until you close to send contractors in there. You're behind the 8 ball. Again, everything in this business is about being proactive. That's what makes you a winner. That's what makes you money, being proactive. When you're reactive, you lose money. Every second you're being reactive, you're losing money. So when you have an opportunity and a good relationship and they know you're buying and you've got that deal and it's 2 weeks before close or a month before close or whatever the case may be, depending on that relationship you have with the person who controls the access, hey, can we get in with some contractors to get these bids? Like this exterior bid for roofs is going to be 400 grand. Like, I don't want to have that like number floating around. It could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 3. Like, can we get our guys in there and be proactive and have these bids, right? And then tell the guys, we are planning to close this day. This is when I want you to start. Like, immediately, be proactive. Major exterior items, again, this is not something you want to do in the high season. You do not want to do this when it's heavy traffic, when it's June, July, all these heavy leasing seasons. Do not do a bunch of exterior CapEx. Now, there's exceptions, like if you're changing the name of the property and you're doing a new sign package, right? I get it. You got to get in there. You got to get the sign change over. You don't want to delay that process. You got to do what you got to do, but have them, get in there and get out quick. You don't want to be tearing up gravel. You don't want to be doing, carports and things like that if you don't have to. Roofing is the exception, and I say that because if I buy a deal in November, January, whatever, right, and I'm like, oh, roofing is on my bid. We're in Texas, guys, and I don't know where some of your deals are, but in Texas, it hails a lot. And so I'm not going to buy a deal in fall and go in and replace the roof this winter. I'm going to wait, because there's a high chance that I'm going to get some hail damage and I'm going to have an insurance claim and I won't have to spend that money on the roof. And then guess what? That's all injectable into the deal. That's carports, that's backyards, that's everything else. Well, it's just, that's how you have to time things like that, right? Don't always jump the gun and say, well, I got to get in there and do this exterior stuff, knowing it's roofing, and that's the one exception. Just wait, because April might come and you might get a ton of rain and you might get some hail and you might say, hey, it's justified, right? That's why I pay for insurance and we got hail damage, so it is what it is. Interior upgrades, again, you don't want to be pushing real hard on these going into slow months. You want to be pushing very hard on these going into the high traffic months. Office upgrades, again, slow season, same thing, you get it, right? You don't want people coming in and doing tours when you got stuff torn up, if you can help it, again. There are exceptions, right? You buy a deal, you got 1 year left of IO, you're trying to get in, you assume the debt, you're trying to get in and execute before you, I get it, right? And those are different scenarios, but this is just the standard. So value add options using a 7% cap rate. Now, I brought this up to Brad, and I'm like, we toured a deal on the last bus tour, student bus tour, and I said, man, there's no carports here. What's going on, dude? Like, that's a massive, that's the first thing we looked at for every single deal. How many carports can we put there? That's an easy way to make money, right? And Brad says, wow, this is C-Class deal. You couldn't do that on this. I said, shit. Every single deal that I've ever done, we at least tested carports, and we've never had an issue. People don't want their car messed up. People in the craziest C-Class asset will have the dopest cars with the dopest rims and not want to mess their shit up, right? Like, they'll pay the $20. They don't think about it like that. They're not budgeting and saying, well, it doesn't fit my budget. They're like, I don't want to mess my car up. Here's $20. I don't think nothing about $20. So it's an easy sell, right? Think about the tenants that you're dealing with. They're not analysts. They're not strategists. They're not sitting here looking at their budgets every month. They're like, I can make another 20. I can make another 20. I'll take a carport. I'll sell them to everybody. I love it. Everybody needs a carport. Who wants their car getting damaged? So think about this stuff. So just to give you an example, and forgive me for I get the little twang thing going on. I'm from Detroit, so forgive me, you guys. I apologize. Carports, about $1,500 each. You get about $25 a month. They got a 20% return on investment. You do 20 carports, assuming this is a C-class deal with a 7 cap. And you guys all know how to do this math, right? $6K in value a year, get you $85,000 on the back. That's all that matters, period. And you're getting cash flow for these things every month. Extended patios. We've done these on C-class deals. Okay, here's why they work the best on C-class deals. A lot of people have these little tiny dogs and do not like to walk their dogs. And they're gonna go out and shit on the patio. Guess what? If you wanna pay me $40 a month to let your dog shit on the patio, be my guest. Be my guest. Honestly, I'm not gonna, go ahead. Go right ahead, that's what I got maintenance guys for. They'll clean it up, you'll move out, right? That works, okay? And that's a huge rent bump. That's $68K in value for 10 units, right? So think about that. And again, these numbers change. We test them always. We always test them out. We say, well, let's do 5, and let's test out the market. Let's see if people, sometimes we'll poll them. If we already have the money raised and we plan on doing them, we'll say, hey, anybody willing to pay for an extended backyard, right? And we'll just kind of feel them out. And if there's a lot of people who are interested in it, we'll go forward with it. Reserve parking. One of the smartest things I ever did, ever, and this is probably the only real solid pat on the back and high fives I got around the office, was implementing reserve parking. It costs you nothing to implement reserve parking, okay? The guy who's the tow truck guy, okay, he's gonna come out and do all the markings for free just to get the account to tow people away. He's like, oh, I'll do the private, I'll put up the signs for you, I'll do everything, as long as when someone's parked in the wrong area, I get to come tow them. Perfect, free, right? And you know how I stumbled across this? My brother was down here living with me for a couple years, and I said, you got to get the hell out of my house. And I put him in one of our deals, the C-class deal over in Richardson or something. And I went there one day, and I'm like, I visit him a lot. I said, I want feedback. Give me feedback. He goes, man, parking is a nightmare over here. It's so annoying. He's like, I get home today, and there's some lady standing in my spot. I'm waiting for my husband. I'm holding the spot for my husband. I go, are you kidding me? Tell her ass to move. He's like, dude, I don't want to do that. And he's like, it's so aggressive here for parking. You wouldn't believe it. I said, how about this? Put 20 reserved parking spaces, send an email out to everybody, and put a flyer on the door of the office, $20 reserve parking for anybody who wants it. They sold literally that month, every single one of them. How much value was that? 68K in value on a 7 cap. Now that was a 5 cap deal because the market is just what the market is. And that was like 150 grand we put. Maybe it was $25 a spot, but this is so easy and so simple to do. If you guys aren't doing it and you guys got tight parking in your deals, even if you don't, it's worth testing 10. Because there's a lot of people who are like, dude, I'll pay $10 a month so I don't have to walk from over there to over here. So I can walk right up the walkway here and I don't have to walk by that person's dog shit, right? Like I'll do that all day long. So think about these things, right? This is money in your pocket. It's small little amounts, but it adds up on the back end. And again, we're going into a market right now, you guys, where the 10-year keeps creeping up, right? And those interest rates keep creeping up. And a lot of you guys are on interest-only loans. And a lot of you guys are going to have to refinance or do something at some point. And so you should always be thinking, like, even these little bits of value that you can add to your deal is going to help you, give you some breathing room, right? And you need all the breathing room you can get. It's just being a smart investor means preparing and being proactive. Again, I'm being proactive. I know that if those interest rates keep rising and I have to refi in 2 years and the rate doesn't look as pretty as it did 2 years ago, well, I did some things, some small things that are going to help me a lot when that time comes. So some of the other things, high level, I'm going to go through real quick. Smart home systems. I've worked with a company called Vivint. There's a lot of them out there. I like Vivint. They come out, put in the thermostats, they put in the keyless door entry with the code, they put in a camera, they do the whole thing, and it's like they charge me $15 or $12 a month. And I charge the tenant $49 a month. Now, there's a lot of tenants out there who I can sell that to and say, hey, guess what? You're going to save on your utilities. This thing keeps your costs low on your thermostat. When you're not here, it doesn't push your stuff up. It's monitored, it's censored, just all this stuff. It's going to save you money on your utilities. And not only that, But you're going to get an alert on your phone anytime my maintenance guy has to go in your house. It's peace of mind. You have cameras now. You can see what we're doing. You have peace of mind. We're not walking in your house and just sending any Joe Blow in your house, right? Keep that stuff in mind because it works on some better properties. It might not work on all of them, but it's an option. And it's not a bad uptick. I mean, you get a decent chunk of money out of that. Package locker system. You know, I haven't found the best way to monetize this. I mean, you can get your money back on it, but more than anything, it helps your staff. So if you guys aren't familiar with package locker system, there's an Amazon option and there's a Luxor option. And this is basically for divas like me who come home and don't want anybody touching my packages, and I don't want to come home before 5 to have to get my package. I want to be able to go into a locker that's safe, secure, dry, and get my package without it being stolen from my doorstep. So not only does it help me, give me peace of mind, it helps me make a decision when I'm going to lease somewhere, because I've been a renter since I've been in Dallas. I'm just now buying a house and moving. The package locker system helps. It helps tenants make the decision, and it also helps your staff. Nobody wants a whole corner of the office with a ton of packages. It's a liability on you. You lost my package, someone stole my package, your staff stole the package, who knows? Avoid the conversation. It's about 10 to 20 grand to have it installed. Again, you can monetize it, $3 a month or something, small, but it helps your staff. It helps them take time off their hands dealing with packages and everything else. And then cable contracts, not something that I particularly would be a fan of moving into a deal, but again, you make money. You can get a cable contract on a deal. People might piss and moan, but again, that's why we turn these units. That's why we turn this rent roll, right? We're putting new people in. So in 6 months, nobody will know. Nobody will be bitching anymore, right? You go in, you get a $50 cable contract from AT&T or whoever, they're all offering it, and you make $10 a month on it. Tracking unit upgrades. Are you able to see how much each unit has cost you since ownership? This is high level stuff. This is stuff that it takes a lot of communication with regionals. It's not something that we ever mastered on any deal, but it is something that it just helps to know how much units are costing you. Like if it's the same two bedroom unit, same square foot, knowing what those are costing you on average is going to help you have better underwriting on the next deal, right? Do you know it's been upgraded and to what extent? I can't tell you how many times I've walked into the leasing office and said, well, okay, well, what do we have available right now? And what does that look like? Does it have upgraded appliances? And I have to go see. We have to go see. I have to go check. I'm like, we should be putting that in the system. Like we should all know what's been done to that unit. So it's important to track your unit upgrades and specifically what's been done. Because sometimes you go in and, well, the lights are good enough, so we're not going to do lights. We're going to do plumbing, da-da-da-da-da. Make sure that you know what's going on in those units and what units have what. So you can be proactive with your managers when someone's moving out. We know that this one's probably going to need lights. When they don't know, it just delays the process. Then they have to order lights. Then they have to wait for, you know what I mean? Just be proactive. Offering partial and full upgrades. Again, this can cause a lot of confusion. When you're doing both, you're offering some partial, some full, right? You just want to track those because this is what causes the confusion when you're like, well, what does this unit have? Well, if we were doing partials, it says it was a partial, but we actually did appliances on this one too. Just track it, right? Just track it. That's an asset manager's job. It's good to do that. PO systems, in a perfect world, that I'm not going to promise to anybody because it probably won't happen, but in a perfect world, a PO system is great. PO system lets you know exactly what's been spent on every single unit, every detail, every maintenance call, everything. Marketing, real quick. What are the sources of marketing? What are your return on investment on those marketing sources? And what are the factors? Again, where the property's located. Is it front-facing traffic? Do you get a lot of drive-by traffic? Is it on the side of the freeway or is it back in the neighborhood, right? You want to really, really think about those things when you're doing your budget and you're putting together your marketing budget. The biggest thing I can tell you that I learned as far as a lesson on this, I'm looking over the marketing, I'm auditing the management company, and I'm looking and I see we have a $400 expense on every single deal because we're advertising on Zillow. I don't know how many people in here have rented an apartment in the last 10 years, but nobody uses Zillow. Everybody uses apartments.com. Nobody uses Zillow for apartments. They use Zillow for homes. They really don't. I looked at the traffic report and saw we had one lead on one deal, one lead in the last 6 months from Zillow, yet it was taking up 15% of our marketing budget. Doesn't make sense. Kill it. Kill the Zillow across the table. Put that money into a higher dollar package on apartments.com. Right? You're going to get more traffic from it. So just make sure that you're conscious of where that marketing is being spent. A lot of times your line item will say marketing, and that's all it will say. It's important for you to ask questions. Hey, can you just let me know what this marketing expense breaks down to? What is included in this? Because you should know. Staffing, big thing, takeover, keeping staff, temps. Okay, I really want to drive this home. How much time do I got? Okay, quick. Takeover. You always ideally, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, always ideally want to keep that existing staff if they are doing a good job. I never want to see a takeover where we lost a veteran manager over $2, $3, or $4 an hour. I don't care if I have to cut back and not hire a porter. I'm going to keep that manager. Now, there are scenarios where it's like, it's just not in our budget. It's not in our budget. So here's what you do. Cut the porter or cut somebody. Keep the existing manager on staff. Hire your assistant manager and let her learn from the manager who's the veteran before you say, hey, you're not working out. And maybe she does work out and maybe you're like, okay, it makes sense. But at least do that. The worst thing you can do taking over a deal is lose your manager who's experienced in that deal, because she's been working with the tenants, she's built rapport with the tenants, she knows the community, she knows everything about the deal. Losing her is like starting from scratch. It's the worst nightmare I can imagine. I'm telling you, I've had so many headaches because of losing our manager. And then temps. I am very, very passionately opinionated on hiring temps. You could not waste your money faster than hiring a damn temp. Half the time I walk into an office and we're like, we're short-staffed. We had to hire a temp. What's the temp doing? Answering calls. What the hell does she know about the property? Nothing. Nothing. Not a single thing. Does she care? No, because she won't be here tomorrow. What are we paying her? $23 an hour. You know how annoying it is to me when I have to see that we're letting guys who are great maintenance guys go that want $20 an hour, and we're capped at 18, but yet when we can't find that person, we're hiring a temp for 23? That makes 0 sense. Pay attention to your budget for your staffing, right? Do not let go a good maintenance person. Do not let go a good manager over a couple dollars for a temp, because you will lose money. You have to look at that and assess the situation and really just dive in and pull it apart and say, what makes the most sense here? How do we not lose money? Because I hate losing a good maintenance guy. It crushes me, crushes me. The work orders go through the roof. The bad reviews start pouring in. People are pissed off. People want to move out. The property looks, crappy because there's nobody else. He's so busy he can't pick up the property. Like, it all trickles down, right? So if you have that difference between a couple dollars and your maintenance guy, and your manager is always going to do their default, which is, let's pull in a temp because we need somebody there. It's up to you as an asset manager to look and go meet with them and say, does this make the most sense? Or if I change my budget a little bit, do you think we would be able to get somebody? Well, yeah, we just let Joe go because he wanted $2 an hour more. Well, can we call Joe back? Because it doesn't make sense. Like, I don't want to hire a temp because you pay more and they do less and they know less. It makes 0 sense. Avoid temps at all costs. Hiring criteria, again, it's something where I've seen, people have really strict hiring criteria. And if a guy has a DUI from 5 years ago and he didn't hire him because, real quick, take a pic. Okay. I'll give you guys the slides. So, again, you never want to have such high criteria that, a guy with a DUI 5 years ago who's an awesome maintenance guy isn't getting a job. And that's something I wouldn't say, hey, make this the norm and just do this and let people in even if they have this. I would say if there's a situation that's on the fence, and it's questionable. He seems like a good guy. He's got a DUI. It's kind of, whatever. It's a few years ago, but he's a really good employee. It's something that I want you to address with me as the owner or the asset manager, and just at least give me the opportunity to evaluate this situation, and you should do the same. Other ways to lower operating expenses, obviously green program. I'm not going to dive into this because I could do a whole freaking course on this. If you don't know it, get to know it, understand it, learn it. Mike does it on every single solitary deal. There's not a deal he does not take advantage of the green program. You save BIPs on your loan. There's just a ton of savings. Water conservation, always. It's one of those things. It depends, right? There's certain deals where utilities it might not be in your favor to do this, but if you want to make sure that if it is in your favor and you are paying utility bills, keep in mind that either you're going to save money or you're going to save the tenant money, and so either way it kind of works out for you a lot of times with water conservation. God bless you. And especially irrigation. Some of these companies don't do irrigation. I think that's a big one. You waste money on irrigation. There's a lot of areas that have irrigation systems that pump water to them, and it's like we don't really need to water our plants every day. Like, it's just be conscious of that stuff. Get a quote, I would say, always. RUBS. If you guys aren't familiar with RUBS, there's an Old Capital podcast. I know I've heard it 100 times. It's about RUBS. It's how to dive into that and save money. LED wall packs. Again, LED, energy efficient lighting. All those things are going to help you perform better and save money on your loan and all that. Sorry, I got to get through it here. Is anybody? I'll give you the slide. I promise, Anna. I promise. Takeaways to implement today. So before I even get into this, the thing I kept mentioning over and over that I didn't put on the slide, but now I've done it. Be proactive, you guys. That's the biggest thing that I can tell you is if you're proactive on the front end of these deals and you dive in and you really get a system in place, it doesn't have to be a nightmare the entire time. Don't think that being proactive means that you have to continually have another job. Being proactive is putting the systems in place, knowing what to look for, knowing how to see the triggers, and then setting up the process to repeat it. So you don't, it's not like you have to continually be so like if you have a process in place that's a proactive process, and every time you go and learn a hard lesson and get a lump upside your head, you're like, okay, I gotta fix that, right? You take a shot to the gut, okay, I gotta fix that, and then keep those processes and say, hey, look for these things going forward, right? Be proactive. Create a pulse with custom reporting. So this is something, again, I'm working with Brad. We're trying to figure out what we can do to better serve you guys. But you need to have that pulse. Right? All those key performance indicators that I mentioned, all those things that I look at for a deal, all those things that I have to manually pull myself and put in my own reports, have that. Have your asset management or asset manager put something together. Right? I want to see these important key things, these signs of a bottleneck, these trends, these things. Understand the importance of the politics between the asset manager and property manager. Don't go in as a gunslinger. I'm a gunslinger. Any room I go into, we're negotiating, we're doing a deal, and I'm the person that's in control. I'm just, that's not a way to deal with a property manager. It's very much politics. They have relationships with other owners. They have relationships with Brad. They have relationships. Everybody's connected in some way or another, right? It's all politics. So make sure that you're very, very delicate in how you approach these things, right? You can't go in here and say, I want 100 units and you're going to do this and I want this report and here it is. Fill it out. And they're going to say, we don't want you. Go somewhere else because we got enough people, right? You don't want that. Be delicate. Just say, hey, can you guys help me understand? What's the best process here? How can we do this better? And then implement reserved parking. Honestly, man, you're like, if you don't have reserved parking, it's like, duh, come on, dude. Unless you have like just some weird scenario, why would you not try that? Why would you not just say, okay, hey, Freed, go ahead and do this, and we'll see what we can get. Well, it makes no sense to not do that. And then understand your lease trade-outs. Keep an eye on that stuff. And that's that, guys.
Wow, awesome.
Holy shit. Wow. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. So do we have time for a couple questions now?
Yes, we do. We're going to do Q&A, and before we do that, though, I do just want to say, great job. I mean, from my seat as a student, that was some of the most informative and helpful information I found.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool, man. Cool.
All right, so we have probably about 15 minutes to do some Q&A.
Okay.
So Doug is going to help me, and I do see a lot of hands, so it looks like David.
It's a small room. I can repeat the question versus running around a microphone. Go ahead. What's your question?
You have mentioned this weekly KPI sheet. Do you have template that you could share?
Not at this moment. Again, Brad and I are working on some content and some materials and stuff like that. I want to make sure there's a lot of legality behind that because of how I learned it and the templates that I started with being owned by another firm. So I want to make sure that I abide by all those laws and we all stay friends. So we're working on something, but not at this moment.
Hi.
Hi, Phyllis.
Oh, sure. I am standing. No, I'm I thought I would help you out with that. I loved all your ideas around value creation, revenue, profitability.
Thank you.
But have you also looked at total cost? And the one that struck me with that was adding the existing patios. I mean, adding additional patios. There's a cost to doing that.
Yeah.
And when I think about the ecosystem and total cost, yeah, you get some revenue from that, but now do you have smell infestation and you have to invest in getting, people to come out and clean that up because you've created other problems that you've really encouraged by the issue of people don't want to go somewhere else to take care of their pets?
Yeah, no, it's never been an issue in the past that I've come across. Don't get me wrong, people aren't letting their dogs go out and pile up a 4-foot high pile of shit. I mean, that's not, we make sure the maintenance is monitoring the property and, kind of peeking over balconies. We have rules. We'll send a letter and say, hey, make sure that you guys are keeping your patios nice, things like that, but never where we've incurred an additional cost. And as far as like the money it takes to do those things, like do the, carports and all that stuff, we're either raising for it on the front end, right? Or we're doing it on the refinance or whatever, but it's we just want to obviously keep an eye on that. But no, it's never been something that's came back and bitten us like that I can think of.
Hello.
So
I personally usually learn most from my own mistakes that I
yeah.
make. And coming back to property management and multifamily investment, so I've seen property management companies issuing checks to themselves, like 5 or 6 different checks a month without putting a description line item on the check.
Yeah.
So it was a nightmare figuring out what to
Yeah.
spend the money for.
Yeah.
I've talked to several deal sponsors who said that unfortunately it's apparently pretty common for property management companies to pay bills from other properties using your account.
Yeah,
And
no.
so I just want to hear from you, can you provide one explicit example which was a nightmare for you, or a mistake you maybe have made? What did you learn from it, and how do you prevent it going forward?
Yeah, number one, I don't think that you should ever allow a property manager to pull from one to pay the other. That's just 100% a no-go, absolutely, on any shape or form. It does not matter. So that should never happen, number one. Number two is, if you guys get quotes that are significant, especially if they're significant, if it's, whatever it is, should always be line itemed. Now, regardless if it's line itemed and each line item has a dollar amount next to it, you should at least see a breakdown of what that cost totals. Like what is included in that price, right? If you're not, that is something I definitely would just request. I would say, listen, I've gotten into a lot of battles with contractors, and specifically through property management, because they'd give me these massive quotes and they don't have line itemed out. And there's certain things where I don't need a line item and a price next to it, but I do need to know what's going on for that price, just to, in my head, know if it makes sense. But if it's some big stuff where it's like, you're painting all the railings, and you're painting the house, and you're painting the gutters, and you're painting this, and you're painting that, and there's a lot of big ticket items on there, I want to see that broken down line item by line item. Because if I have to scale something back and I can do without, I want to know what to fluctuate, where can I fluctuate, right? Like what can I pull back and not do, and what price am I working with? You should always have the authority to at least request that. And if you're not seeing that, I'd say that that's probably an issue I would address.
Okay, we have a question over here.
You'd mentioned earlier about incentivizing the staff. Do you always have a bonus program for your leasing?
Well, again, I'm not the manager, so our manager did have a bonus incentive for leasing, and I think it is pretty typical to have that. At the same time, we've gone in and tried to say, okay, whoever can have the highest leasing or sell the most electric referrals or whatever. That's another thing. Electric referrals, you can get those. You switch over to Reliant on your property, and you get your tenants to sign up. Reliant, and those companies will give you a $75 kickback. And so we used to have competitions and say, whoever can get the most Reliant signups this month, we'll give you guys a vacation at the end of the year or whatever. And so the management company was kind of like, well, we don't really do that with any other properties and owners, so we can't really do that. But you can take them lunch, things like that. So Reliant, write that down. Like switch your electric company, save yourself some money in the common areas, and get those kickbacks for the tenants that sign up. Next.
So whenever you decrease the rents, and some of the tenants would go out and they go online and put some nasty remarks about the property. So what is the impact on the new, for getting the new tenants on that, and how do you address it?
Good question. So the question was, when you're upping the rents and increasing the rents, and then someone goes online and pushes a bad, review saying, oh, this isn't priced, this place is a yada, yada, yada. It's important for you to have your property manager or someone at property management to go on there and say, well, be strategic about it. Sir, the reason for the increase is the fact that we've renovated our units, and as you can see on our website, our new units we've put a substantial amount of money into. We care about the community, and we're trying to improve this community. So although the rents are more expensive, it's justified in the quality of the community, right? And so it's just you have to have that person that's always putting out fires, right? And again, as a person renting, if I see a bad review and it is based around the rent price, I know 9 out of 10 times that person's being biased. and pissed off, but it also makes me feel better as a tenant knowing that those are probably nicer units. That's why, right? Someone's in there that's taken the deal and that has control and they're doing something to improve it. So just have somebody that's constantly monitoring that.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions. I've got, Barbara over here and then Muriel, and then we can go to Adam. Before I do that though, I want you to start kind of getting your wheels turning. Before we leave, we're gonna pass out a blank piece of paper. And you know, you've heard us talk a while now about starting a mastermind program. And so we want to hear from you. What things would you like to see out of a mastermind program, a student mastermind program? So that's something that's going to be more on advanced topics. Obviously, you know, today's been a huge hit. This is a very popular topic. So just start thinking about that as you're thinking about these questions on, you know, just what are some things that you'd like to see. And then too, if you have any other type of feedback that you'd like to give, you can be anonymous, you can put your name, you know, it doesn't matter. We'll collect the pieces of paper at the end, but I'll pass those out after we finish our Q&A. And so I'll just get back to our Q&A. Let's see.
Yeah, and on that point, I just want to note, like she said, we're doing a lot right now to improve all. Tello. It's because yours is on at the same time. It won't let mine. So, hello. All right. So we're doing a lot right now. What you guys, you know, may be unaware of is me coming to the company. My goal is to better serve you guys, to keep you guys, you know, more engaged and give you more content. And so Brad and I are working very closely with that. Brad, we just got our first Sumrock office, which is a big deal. You know, we're doing a lot of things, putting people in place to have more support and offer more content for you guys. So it is very important when she passes out that paper, write down your thoughts. If there's something that you think you'd like to see better or like to hear more about, please take this opportunity to do that, because over the next couple months, while we don't have a rat race, in between now and just January 1st, we're redoing the website, we're redoing a lot of things. This stuff is going to heavily impact what we do next year. So please take this opportunity to write down your thoughts. Next question, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Question, so how far in advance do you push for renewals?
I don't know if I understand the question.
You said you got, like, you're pushing for renewals to happen, right? So, like, how far, like, do you wait 30 days to then before their lease ends, 60 days, 90 days?
Oh, well, no, no. The manager usually will have a 60-day rule. So it's 60 days, they're reaching out and saying, hey, what's your plan? What's the game plan, Stan? We got a $50 rent increase if you want to stay, or you can move. So the manager is usually going to set that. It's going to be 60 days. One more and then you.
Muriel, you had a question?
Hi, thank you for your presentation today. I thought it was really enlightening. I have a question on walking the fine line between micromanaging and controlling your expenses. I guess one of the things you would like to implement is put a dollar limit on how much your property manager can spend without going to you, ask for an authorization on the expense. But how do you make sure that that doesn't go out of control with like multiple under
ding dong things like nickel and dimes?
Yeah.
Yeah. You just gotta watch it, okay? Every month, and I wouldn't do this every month, but every now and then, if I start to see things that are piling up nickel and diming me, I'm gonna just kind of go into the report and look exactly what was spent on what unit, right? Like if it's a faucet, if it's a whatever, and just have the conversation. You just want to be able to have the conversation, and don't go into it and say, hey, I want to know why I feel like you're nickel and diming me. Go in with facts, go in with evidence, and say, hey, I just noticed that our spending for X, Y, and Z has increased by X% in the last couple months, and I've noticed that it's because of these faucets. Is there a better option? Are we just replacing them without trying to fix them first? Like, I just want to make sure, and again, it's just a conversation. You got to be comfortable having that conversation saying, I just want to make sure I'm not getting nickeled and dimed to death. I want to fix things. I want to make sure the tenants have a clean and safe place to live, but at the same time, I want to make sure that what we're doing is justified. Next question, go ahead.
Test. Cash versus accrual accounting. I know different folks in the deals.
Yeah.
Some investors like to see accrual. CPA likes to see accrual. Property managers sometimes the cash accounting. In your rhythm and your reports with the property manager, how do you interface?
Yeah. So all of the stuff that we did was on accrual. There was one specific owner that we did a deal for that wanted a cash basis. And that was my first experience with working with cash basis, and I worked on that deal for 6 to 9 months. And you know, I prefer accrual, but there is things about the cash that I do like, right? Like not assuming that we're going to get that money back in the bad debt column. Like, you know, I don't like to always jump to conclusions and assume things. So sometimes I do like certain factors about the cash, but I think the accrual, you know, considering it's what the accountants and whatnot go by, I would probably stick with that.
Okay, awesome. I think we had a question over here.
Hey, Carl, thanks for the content.
No problem. Hey, by the way, this guy's a new student. He just joined a couple months ago. He's a foundations member. He's like, hey, what do I do? Talk to this guy, okay? He's got money. He wants to give it to you.
Thanks. Just invested in a deal, so I'm going to have to.
All right. Well, that's all right. Don't tell him that. Just keep him on the hook, damn it. Come on.
The question he had earlier was about not getting into a pricing war with the apartment next door.
Yep.
You said you're using software to analyze, you know, what you set your rents at, and if you do that, you know, manually, and then you see the apartment next door with the similar units, how do you keep from, you know, going back and forth and lowering it $25 to compete over and over again?
Well, you just got to kind of set the standard. You know what I mean? It's like me personally, I'm saying, hey, dude, I'm going over here. I'm walking over here. I'm going to say, what's up, guys? What are we doing here? We're going to keep beating each other over the head, or, you know, we're going to get on the same page. Like we're next door neighbors. We're both trying to win here, right? Like I'm not going to put myself in a hole. I'm not going to go below where I need to be on my rent. So at the end of the day, it's just, you know, it's kind of a knockdown, drag out battle. You know what I mean? You don't want to ever go below what you have set as your expectation. But at the same time, you know, you got to have a good manager who can pull that play, because as an asset manager, that's not your job. That's your manager's job. But it's, you know, let them come up with the genius idea. I don't really have the best answer, to be honest.
Okay, awesome. We have time for 2 more questions, and Tom has one, so.
And I'll be here all day, guys. You know, if you got another question that you didn't get to ask or you think about it, feel free to pull me aside. Go ahead.
So, Carl, great job.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
How accessible, I mean, we have all these other coaches. How accessible are you as a coach on this material?
I tell you what. So that's a great question. So I'm not.
Potentially be something maybe.
Yeah. I'm not a coach for Brad. I'm here to help Brad take a great business and make it even better, right? Again, it's one of those things where everything he's done has got him here, and it's a great business. Where we're looking to go and what we're looking to do with this is far, far more advanced. So I will say that I don't think I'll ever be a coach. I'm very accessible. If you have a question, I'm always happy to help. That being said, we are putting things together, and it won't be a coach kind of thing, but I have a feeling this won't be my last time on stage helping people understand how to do this.
Absolutely, and keep the ideas coming. The ideas and feedback, good, bad, ugly, we thrive on that. That helps us grow, so keep the ideas coming. Okay, so we have time for one last question, and that will go to Elaine.
Carl, you mentioned you sold the highest price per door in one of the deals. What are the preparations in order to get the most or the highest, you know, maybe 3 months prior to marketing it and then during the marketing
Very,
process?
very, very, very good question. Number one thing I would say is find the dumbest buyer, okay? Find the dumbest buyer who's been put out on deals and been the best in finals 20 times and cannot wait to get a deal done and is chomping at the bit, and tackle him. The second thing I would say is, if you have, like, say we were that particular deal, and I'll tell you exactly how we did that. Here's our game plan. This is a genius thing, by the way, if you guys aren't doing this. So that was a 100-unit deal, and I think we upgraded like 50% of the units on that deal, okay? So that was, you know, the sprayed countertops, blah, 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 your standard turns that we're all doing. We did one before we sold it, like 2 months prior, where we did granite, and we knocked it out. Like, we had awesome fixtures, the whole deal, and we got like a $250 rent bump. All you have to do is show that to the next buyer. And they see that as, well, there's justified meat on the bone on this deal, and it's in a good area, and he did granite, and they got 250 rent bumps. Boom. Enough said. That guy's going to go in there and say, well, as long as you can prove the concept, right? You want to make sure that before you go to sale and before you go to market, just test the waters and see. If you do one thing to one particular unit, even if you pay for it out of your pocket, just to see, if you could prove that concept, that's going to get you more bang for your buck.
Awesome. Carl, great job.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much, guys.